All right. Welcome everybody to episode 22. This is Create. So we all came together today and this is fun. This is the first time I've been doing this, of doing a live call and using it for the podcast as well. And I thank you guys for showing up today on a Saturday where you could be doing literally anything else with your life, right? Distracting yourself in so many different ways. And this creation process that I'm going to talk about today, this actually came to me I think in 2014. I had this like epiphany of Create.Believe.Conquer. This is a process that I use that I've turned into an email series. I've turned it into an ebook. I've turned it into a retreat. And then this year, I practice what I preach. This year is actually the year that I'll be turning it into an actual physical book. So it's kind of cool to see this process come along. And it's part of what I'm going to be teaching you today, which is we can easily just sit here and be scared and afraid and paralyzed and do nothing. And I think there's a time for that, because I think, especially if we're going through something like we're going through in these unprecedented times, there is a time where we need to like process, just be, even distract ourselves, eat popcorn, whatever it is, like just veg out for a little while. But then there comes a time where like enough is enough and it is time to move forward and it is time to move on. It's not to negate anything that's going on, but it truly is for our own sanity, for our own well-being. And I also say for the example for our future children, the people that we're affecting in our day-to-day lives. Like, yes, people keep saying we haven't been through anything like this ever, but like, other people have been through really big things. Like, do you remember the Holocaust? Like, I'm like, there are big things that have happened that people have been able to get through. So I always go back to, what can I learn from them? What can I learn from the human spirit? How can we learn from each other? And then how can I and us, all of us, be an example for others and really step up and be leaders for ourselves, for our families, for people in the future. And really, I think it starts with showing up. So the first thing, thank you for showing up and actually being here today. I'm going to take you through the process of Create. I kind of came up with this little acronym using the words of CREATE. So I'm going to give you that process, and then I'll give you some journaling prompts that lead into your vision, your values, your worthiness. Because especially in a time like this, what we focus on is what's going to be our reality. And again, I bring you back to people who have been through something like a prisoner of war camp, where they had nothing. And what they chose to focus on got them through being a prisoner of war for 6 years, right? They could have focused on the fact that they were tortured every single day. They could focus that they don't have any food. They could focus on maggots are eating my body. And I'm using really graphic images for you for a reason, to shock you, to go, okay, maggots are not eating my body. Okay. Like, okay, that's a perspective. And sometimes it's funny, but sometimes it's like, sometimes we need that to get out of our heads about current circumstances. So the first thing, as you're thinking about like, what do I want to create in this time? I want you to think about a time in your past where something was really challenging for you that you were able to overcome, or that you were able to now, like, wow, that was in the distant past. And I want you to even think about, like, I remember being a teenager and I can still remember, like, when I would lose a volleyball match, I thought it was the end of the world and nobody could convince me that it wasn't, right? Because that's what I was focused on. And now, obviously, as a 35-year-old woman, I'm like, that's ridiculous. But each stage of our life is very important to us, right? And we feel like right now is so important. And it's always going to be that way. The now is very important. It's always going to feel, this is important, this is impactful, and it's true. But what we choose to focus on in this time is going to get us through. So I like to go back and think of, and I'll use a couple of examples. And if you guys want to start jotting down or putting in the comments, maybe a couple of examples of things you've overcome in the past, this is going to be a great place for us to create from. I just made an Instagram post about, I used to, right when I got out of college, I graduated college with a degree in molecular cell biology. Sounds great, but I graduated right at the time of the recession and nobody was hiring. So I was working in a laboratory on night shift. And I can remember sitting in front of the pathological waste bucket and I'm dumping human waste. I'm separating formaldehyde, which is a reproductive toxin, from body tissues like pieces of fat, somebody's foot, like endometrium stuff, like all of this like gross pathological waste. And I'm sitting here going, like, surely there's something more than this. So I use that as a visual representation of like, wow, I'm not doing that anymore. I am so grateful. And even though in that moment, I couldn't see a way beyond that, I couldn't see a way to get out of that situation, I still had the belief and I still had this hope and this desire that it will be different someday. And that God's using this time to really work on something within me. So now I can look back and say, I'm grateful that I'm not in that situation anymore. I have some things coming into the chat here, so I'm going to read that. Yeah, lost our house. Lisa said, lost our house. Ability to overcome it, really. And that's one of those things where somebody can say, yes, that is huge. Overcoming a divorce, losing a loved one, right? Joanne, put myself through college, worked 2 jobs to pay off our debt, overcame burnout in my business. We're constantly overcoming. So remembering that although this seems like it's a huge scale, we still have the tools to get through any situation that comes to us. So when times get tough, remember another time where you're like, wow, I created a different outcome. I created from my current circumstance a different outcome. Because one of the biggest limiting beliefs that we all have is that my current circumstance defines everything for me. What's happening right now is going to define for the rest of my life. And that's simply not true, right? So we're going to work through that process. I want to start here by going through step 1, or the C of the situation. And this is calm energy. And it's funny because I was once certified as a dog trainer, and I like to talk to my dogs about calm energy all the time. And I still like to watch Cesar Millan. So you know what I'm talking about. Whenever the dogs are like hyped up, really excited, they cannot focus on anything if they're really hyper and excited, right? So before my dogs are about to go on a walk or we're about to go out into the world, I require them to have calm energy because they're not able to make decisions. They're not thinking right whenever they're in that hyper energy or when they're in that fearful energy, right? And so we are the same way. Yes, we are physiological beings, not saying that we're dogs, but again, I like to make light of the situation sometimes because it's like we can start to train ourselves to cultivate calm energy. And I really like to listen to there's a podcast out there I talk about all the time. It's called Jocko Podcast. I'll continue to recommend it. I've been listening to it for 4 years. It's a former Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink. He leads the podcast, and he typically has people who are survivors of war, of prisoners of war, of the Holocaust, whatever. And the podcasts are long. They're like 3 hours long, and I listen to them all the time. And the reason I bring this up is because they were just recently talking about he had to call in for like backup, like support, right? Like they're getting bombed, they're getting shot at by the enemy. That's like real physical danger that you would have to have a flight or fright response to. And he would have to call in for support on the radio. And he remembers saying, well, I just used a calm voice. Like, hey, we need to send a couple guys over here. Meanwhile, they're literally getting shot and bombed and people are dying and legs are flying off, right? So we have a way to cultivate the calmness even when everything seems to be going to hell. So there's a couple things that you can do. We'll talk about kind of all of them here. And I want you guys to put in the chat too, because I'm not the expert on what works for you to create calmness, right? You're the expert on you. You know what helps to cultivate calmness. And we all do this too, where we're like, I know I should be doing X, Y, Z, but I'm going to do this, this, and this instead. And for me, it's been like scrolling endlessly on Facebook and getting really irritated because I'm like, oh, people are so annoying. When I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take myself out of that environment and I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to put my feet on the ground and I'm going to lay in the sun with my dogs. And there we go. I've just cultivated calm energy. So as you guys are thinking of this, I want you to type in the chat, what helps you cultivate calm energy? And then I'll go through a couple of things that are physiologically proven to do that as well. But you might have some personal ones. And as you type them in, it's going to give other people some ideas of what they could do as well. So one of the main ones that I always talk about that if you've followed me for any amount of time, you know that I'm a proponent of is meditation, affirmations, meditations. And really what that is just allowing your body to sit, lay, stay calm, be focused. There's a lot of different meditations out there. You can use guided meditation on Insight Timer. You can go on YouTube and look up Deepak Chopra. There's so many things that you can use, or you can simply like just sit in nature and like look at a flower and like you just looking at that flower, looking at that tree and just being with it is meditation. It's cultivating that presence, that calm, that peace in the moment. Another one that can do that is exercise, right? Moving your body. And again, usually the last thing that we want to do when we're like feeling anxious or like icky, usually the last thing that we want to do is move our bodies because it's like, oh, I have to do that. I don't want to. Well, what's interesting is as soon as you do it, as soon as you flip that switch and you're like, you know what? Okay. My new thing is anytime I feel anxious, triggered, depressed, starting to feel low energy, I'm just going to go for a walk around my block, or I'm just going to get up and do 10 squats. See if that doesn't shift your energy, right? And so if you can start to make a commitment that when this trigger happens, I am committed to this versus this. Because we all know those things that we typically will go to numb. Drinking wine. I've been falling victim to that as well. Drinking wine, baking cookies, like we're in the house, like just go eat a snack. All of those things that we can do during this time. Although luckily in the state of North Carolina and most of the US, it's starting to get warmer now. Most of us can get outside to just sit in the sun and that vitamin D feels real good. So maybe that's something that we can start doing. I have some things coming to the chat here. Getting out into nature, aromatherapy, deep breathing, classical music. Yes. Anytime I'm around my horse, which I can't do right now, breathing, sitting in the sun. Kristen, I want to suggest something. I found myself going down like this YouTube horse trainer situation. So just want to throw it out there. There's like a horse whisperer on YouTube that I've been watching and it's really magical. So that might help you. I'm not sure. And then, okay, Lisa says being where there's a body of water, sounds of nature, walking. Yep. 67 yesterday, 37 today. Yeah, I get that. So I don't want to say we can always rely on nature because we can't. Because you know what we'll do then? We'll be like, oh, it's raining. I'm just going to stay inside and eat my feelings and watch Lord of the Rings, all of them. But always having something. And this kind of brings me into my next point too. This calm energy allows creation, right? It allows creation for us because we cannot create from a place of fear. By telling yourself, okay, I'm calm, then we can start to create. We can start to get creative about different scenarios. Even just this exercise going, well, right now I'm not really in a high state of panic. I'm not in a high state of fear. Now I can start to get a little bit more creative of what makes me feel good. Oh, I like to light a candle. I like to drink tea. I like to listen to this music. And then when you go triggered, maybe you put it on a list and that list is just right there. Because when we're triggered and we're in that state of emotion, we almost don't know what to do sometimes. We're just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. But if you have those tools, you have them on the list, maybe you go over to your list and go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I promised myself I would do this. This is what I'm going to do. And then you can go to the next thing and then you can go to the next thing. Deep breathing is free. We all have lungs. Like that's a beautiful one because we all have lungs. We all have unlimited access to the internet pretty much right now as well. So you can go to YouTube, you can go to those places like podcasts that are going to give you that calming energy that you need and want. But you can also easily get triggered by those things too. So tread lightly when you're getting on the internets. This is also going to go into point number 2, which is release and reflect. So a lot of this creation has to do with forgiveness, worthiness, spending time with yourself. So I saw a post today and it was so interesting. And it was just like a really good post, I think, to highlight what's going on right now. Somebody was asking about, like, my nails are growing out, and how do you get them off with acetone or whatever? And so are mine. Like, my nails are growing out. I typically don't have nails on, but my brother is getting married, so I put the nails on. He had to cancel the wedding anyway, so it's fine. But somebody was asking about that, and somebody in the comments put, "Oh, well, of course this would happen right now because I finally could afford to get my nails done." And I like looked at that situation without judgment, because again, everybody's being impacted in different ways, right? Like, some people, they're not able to get their nails done. Some people, they're not able to get their eyelashes done. Some people are losing their jobs. Like, everybody's having this real situation happening to them. But what I thought was interesting was, she was like, well, of course this would happen. That no matter what happens, that person is always going to say, well, of course this would happen to me, right? No matter what, that's always going to be her scenario. That's always going to be her situation. So sometimes we think we deserve what's happening to us. We're like, yep, of course this would happen. Right when I tried to start my business, right when so-and-so we were getting back on our feet with money. Like, of course this would happen. So just start to check in with yourself if that thought comes up for you. And it's okay if it does, because part of this is recognizing what thoughts are coming up for me that are really not serving me in this time, right? Like, what's coming up for me? And what's really been coming up for me is I'm almost feeling guilty for how positive I'm feeling, because I know other people are like feeling really negative. But I was like, I'm glad I'm not a teenager. I was thinking about that yesterday. I was like, I'm glad I'm not a teenager and I'm not like dating somebody in high school, because I would be like so upset that I couldn't see my significant other in high school. Like, it would be so dramatic. And then I was like, I'm glad it's nice outside. Like, I'm so glad this didn't happen in the dead of winter. Like, there were so many things I was thinking of that I'm like, am I actually positively crazy because I keep finding these things to be grateful for, right? That has been a cultivation of time, of being able to start looking at those positives. That has grown me over time to look at the positives. And it's not to say that things aren't challenging over here. It's just I'm choosing not to focus on them, right? Like, I'm a military spouse now. So the military owns us. And I'll just tell you right now, we don't know what's going to happen to us and our family in the next 90 days. We don't know. We don't know where we're going to be, what we're going to, like, we don't know. And right now I'm just like, you know what? I don't have control over that. So me spending time focusing on that is not going to serve me in this time. Showing up continually is going to serve me. It's going to serve others. So that's what I'll choose to do in this time. So this time, spending time, allowing yourself to sit with the thoughts, journaling the thoughts, releasing without judgment whatever's not serving you, is going to allow you to get in that creative space. I'm going to check the chat real quick here. Oh, yes. Melissa says, it's my youngest daughter right now. She can't understand why she can't go see him. Yes. And that puts in perspective of just like our ability to process things as we do the work and as we get older and as we kind of step into this. And then Lisa says, can be easier said than done depending on our season of life and situation. Yes. And I think there is a such thing as being like overly optimistic and like blind to things that are happening. But I also think, which is going to get me to step 4, will get me to my next point about that. So we'll kind of readdress that once we get to step 4. Any questions on this piece right here? Worthiness, forgiveness, and time with self. This is release and reflect. You can type any questions in the chat there, but I'm going to move forward because I think once we get to step 4, you're also going to see another way. So the next piece is environment. So environment is so huge, and it's always huge, right? There's no time whenever environment is not affecting us. And we're naive to think that our environment isn't affecting us, right? So this is the people that we're around, the images, thoughts, movies, talk, whoever's talking to us, the Facebook groups that we're in or not in, all of that is going to affect us. So who is around us? Can we control it or can we not? Like, obviously we're in close proximity with our families right now. So that can be a good, that can be a challenge, that can be triggering. There's opportunity for more growth and development there. But we have the ability with the internet to choose who we are going to connect with during this time and choose to draw inspiration from one another as well during this time. So it's very normal to start, especially for extroverts. I'm an introvert. So again, I'm kind of like, woohoo, I get to be alone. This is so great. Like, and then I'm like, but I know there's people that like really like to be together. And also maybe in 2-3 months, I'll want to be, I would probably want to be out and speaking in front of people again because I like that, right? But it hadn't hit me hard yet. For some people, it's going to hit us very hard for not being able to connect in person like we used to. So that is going to be on us to show up, be vulnerable, say, hey, I need to check in with you every Friday, every Monday, whoever it is, whatever it is, because we are going to need more during this time because of the fact that we're not getting that social interaction that we used to get. But again, our response is our responsibility, right? We can't blame it on anybody else. We can't, for me, I was kind of complaining about Facebook, but like, that's my responsibility that I was on Facebook scrolling for 2 hours. That's nobody else's, right? Like, people are bored. They're all posting the same thing. That's annoying me, but that's not their fault. That's my responsibility to deal with that and shift into a new environment to where I'm not triggered by those things anymore, right? So the next piece is, Melissa says, this week has hit me hard and the feeling of being overwhelmed set in. Yes, it can be when we go into what if. What if all these things happen, especially financially right now? And I want to talk about that financial piece too towards the end of what can we create financially, like in the next 2, 3, 4 days. We do have a lot of stuff. So I'm going to tap into that once we get to the end of the call of starting to create things that we maybe never saw as assets for us before, and shifting in our businesses, in our job, in our career, in how we show up, that maybe shifts the way that we earn income. So we're going to get there too, and starting to be creative about that, because there are so many people losing jobs, losing opportunities. But you notice there are some businesses that are doing really well, like doing really well. So what that means is all that's happening right now is our needs are shifting to something else. And as anything, if we can fulfill a need within society that has a value attached to it, then we're able to create an income based on what people need, right? And I want to break it down back to like, back in the olden days, people used to trade like a pelt of fur. Like, I will trade you this pelt of fur so you can make clothing, and you will give me an axe, right? Like, that's what we used to do. So we as humans have that capability of figuring out this way to trade, barter, do something, service. Like, we have so much ability, and it's almost like now we're being challenged to kind of like cultivate that innate ability that we've had as humans for all these thousands and millions of years since we've been humans. The internet has spoiled us a little bit. And we have a lot of opportunity on the internet as well. But environment. Okay, next step. Number 4, this is probably the biggest one of creating anything. Anything. And it sucks, which is why I'm kind of stalling. At least it did for me whenever my coach told me about this. Acceptance. Accepting and allowing the situation to be as it is. Ugh. Like, you kind of want to punch somebody when they say that, because you're like, do you know how hard it is for me right now? This is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. Anytime we argue for our limitations and we say, yeah, but, we're going to continue to stay exactly where we are. When we can accept what has happened, I can't change it, it's in the past, I can't control it, but now I have my present and I have my future ahead of me. And I'm bringing this up because I just listened to this podcast of this guy who jumped on top of a grenade, lost almost all of his body parts, the physical recovery was enough to try to get through that. But the mental and emotional recovery of, I don't have all my parts, I don't have an eye, my face is messed up, like all of that, what got him through that time of being blown up is acceptance. I can't change it. I cannot change that I don't have body parts anymore. He could have chosen to go through life as a victim of, I don't have these body parts, I guess, whatever. But he chose to say, I'm still alive. I am so blessed to still be alive. I still have value to offer. I want to help other people to let them know that if they have life, like live your life to the fullest, right? Don't live in fear. Don't live in what if. So the longer you can sit in acceptance and just be like, yeah, it is what it is. And I used to get annoyed at that phrase, like, it is what it is, right? But if you can just go, okay, this is what it is. These are the circumstances. These are the facts. Can't change it. But I'm going to sit here in acceptance and go, okay. Soon as you do that, and you actually, and this goes back to step 2, like the release and reflect, as soon as you can accept, all of that energy that was tied up into fighting with your current circumstances can now be released to flow into creation. Because if we're just sitting here fighting, going, this is not fair, this sucks, I hate this, this is this blah blah blah, all day long, we're just playing that game and nothing got done. We weren't productive. We didn't create anything. We just stayed in that pattern all day long. And this might be something you need to wake up with every single day. And if you ever been through a breakup, you know that feeling when you like forget that you're broken up for a minute. You're like, oh, we didn't break up. And then you remember, you're like, no, we broke up. Oh, my life is over. Like that moment of bliss when you forget that it happened and then you remember that it happened, but then you finally move through to acceptance. And this is also something that comes, and this is not the same. Their levels are very different, but in grieving the loss of a job, in grieving the loss of a loved one, acceptance has to set in at some point or you're never able to move through that process. So a couple of ways that you can accept that is going back to like the calm energy, going back to how can I sit with this and just sit with it and allow it? And then how can I shift into like a 1% better feeling thought, which would be, okay, this sucks really bad. Either I miss this person or I miss this job or this money situation is really challenging. And then start to ask, like, is there somebody who went through either a worse situation? Is there somebody who has gotten through this? It's 4:44 right now on 4:4. I just wanted to give you that. I just looked at my phone right now, so that was great. Is there somebody who's gotten through this? I like to think about this whenever I look at the payments, my residual payments that still need to be made to certain businesses, right? Some people would call it debt. I used to be paralyzed by it. Came out of school with 30 grand of debt, which really isn't a lot these days. A lot of people are coming with 90 to 100K right out of school. And a lot of people have like $1 million homes, and like there's always a lot bigger, right? There's always a lot bigger. Now, it's not to downplay anything that happens to us, because whatever has happened to us feels large and big to us. But I have to think, like, somebody dumber than me, with less education than me, with less privilege than me, was able to use their mind to get through the situation. So if they were able to do it, surely I'm able to do it with a degree in molecular cell biology. And again, I'm making a little bit of fun of myself, but it's kind of fun to make fun of ourselves when we're in our story, just to go, okay, come on. Like somebody who hasn't had the level of education that I had, who came from a way worse situation, has gotten through this. All right, I'm just going to be open to the possibility of something better coming. So step 4, allowing. There's a book out there too, acceptance and commitment therapy. If you want to, you can just Google it on, or you can look it up on Audible. That's a process that you can actually go through. If you really need to like work through acceptance, you can go through the process of it. But I also believe a lot can be done through meditation, setting intentions, doing forgiveness work, like just accepting, and then just being like, today I'm going to accept where I'm at and I'm going to move forward in this day. So this is something you can do daily simply without any other resources as well. I got 2 more points and then we're going to go into kind of your homework and the Q&A at the end. So timing is number 5. Timing. So when you get the inspiration, go for it. Don't wait. Don't question it. This is about creation, right? This is part of me. Like, I created this program, right? This Create.Believe.Conquer idea in 2014. It's been 6 years, right? So part of me goes, that's great. I like did it. I acted on it. But I'm also like, could I have already had a book done already? Probably. Now, I'm not going to spend time beating myself up because I can't go back, right? I can't go back and write the book. I can't go back and relive it, but I can act in the now and go, now is now. Now is now. If anything is going to teach us this situation, now is now. That's all we have is now. So when you get an inspiration to like, oh, I'm going to do this. This sounds fun. Okay, do it. Do it. If you decide you want to go on your sewing machine, paint a project, even if you have laundry to do, even if you have these other things to do. I think we start to lose our creativity when we start to push off other things as more important. Oh, I need to do this. This needs to get done because this is more important. And what we're learning now is we need to be creative. This is a time for creativity. People are finding out new needs, new niches, new markets, new opportunities. Like I just saw something in a Facebook group of, all the military, they're supposed to have their hair cut every week and they can't go out and get their hair cut. So there are hairdressers doing online courses on how to cut your husband's hair at home. That is a market that they never would have had, right? But they're ready, they're creative, they're acting. The first person who acts on that and is like, hey, $100, I'll show you how to do this, is now going to be making income from that opportunity because the timing, they got the inspiration, they saw the need, and they acted. So the timing is now to do it, to act, to go for it, and to prioritize creativity versus prioritizing cleaning the whole entire kitchen from top to bottom, or, like just doing all those things that we think are more important than creativity. And then this last piece, number 6, is elevate. E for elevate. So who are you going to move towards now? And this kind of has 2 meanings. For yourself, who are you going to move towards being and becoming? And then also, who are you going to move towards in your inner circle, in the people you surround yourself with? I was just, my dog is in the background crying. I was just chatting with a group of ladies, and I'm going to say there's no judgment here, but I'm going to give a perspective on this. So they were talking about watching some different reality shows. And I was kind of asking like, well, what's the premise of it? Like, what's the moral of the story? Like, what's the purpose of the reality show? And I'm all for TV, right? Like, it's okay. Some coaches will say, don't watch TV, it wastes your life. I think there's time for entertainment, right? I also think there's a time where we indulge a little bit too much. And we know when we're doing it to numb our feelings or to make us feel better about something. And her key takeaway, I think there's this show out there called something to do with social media, and they're like dating, but they don't see each other. Like some kind of if you guys know what the show is called, type it in the chat. But it's about them not seeing each other and then they get married. And 2 things came from this. I was like, well, what's the purpose? Like, why do you watch it? Like, what value do you get from it? And she's like, well, I just like knowing that my life isn't as bad as theirs. And I'm like, okay, got it. And I get it. There's value in that, or like making yourself feel good, right? But is it elevating you? Is it elevating you, or is it just making you feel okay with your current life that you already have? And then the second piece was, she's like, well, and one of my friends is going to go be on the show. And I was like, oh, interesting. She's like, well, she's great. She's very entertaining. And I was like, cool, awesome. And she's like, and she really wants to like meet someone. And I was like, hate to say it, but that is not the way to meet someone and to build a true, lasting, loving relationship through a TV show where you don't know anybody, and then you show up at the altar, and then by the end, they don't know. Like this is how it ends apparently. You show up at the altar to marry that person, but they don't know if the other person wants to marry them or not. So then you find out at the end that one person wanted to marry, the other person didn't. And I'm like, okay. So that's just not a show I would watch. I watch other shows. I watch shows that for some people are very, very gruesome. I watch a show about Nazi hunters going and killing Nazis. The reason I like that is because there's a moral of the story of like good triumphs over evil, and like you got to be tough. Like, so there's a moral to it, to each their own. My point is this: when you surround yourself, and I know the Tiger King is really big right now too. And again, people probably watch that show and like, I am so glad I'm not that guy, right? And we can feel really good about ourselves, but are we elevating? Like, are we progressing? Are we being inspired to do more? Or are we just feeling really good that we drank 4 beers instead of 6 that day, right? So what are we doing to pull ourselves forward to elevate? And we don't always have to be, like sometimes I get annoyed with personal development. I'm like, I just don't want to. I just want to watch TV. I don't want to like learn. I don't want to grow. I just want to watch. I think there's time for that. But there's also scheduled time for getting around a group of people who is going to lift you up, who is going to require you to show up differently, right? Because truly, if left to our own devices, and I used to say this all the time when I was fitness coaching, if left to my own devices, like in solitude, I would just watch TV and eat cookie dough in the dark every day, probably. Like that would be fine for me, right? But it gets to a point whenever you just can't do that anymore. And having a group of people to hold you accountable, to show up for you, and to have people to serve is going to help get you out of the funk and help to start get you being creative. So I have a couple journaling prompts as I leave you guys, and I have these typed in my phone, and this will be up in a form too in that Facebook group. Look it up. All right, so here are your journaling prompts. Who do I want to be in this time, this current time? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? This has a lot to do with values. If you have not yet defined your values, I have a values worksheet on my website. You can just go to CamiKennedy.com, define your values. And then who do I want to be next year? Where do I want to be next year? This time, 2021. Because if we continue to let circumstances define us in this current time, then by 2021, not much will have changed with ourselves. And then 5 years and 10 years. Who do I want to be now, next year, 5 years, 10 years? And then the next piece is, what are my values? What values do I want to live in? And maybe it's time to shift some of your values. If you've never defined them, maybe now is the perfect time to define them. One of mine, let me see, I have mine written in my book here, and I have a values podcast you guys can revisit, but one of mine is disimplicity, the combination of discipline and simplicity. Discipline is showing up. You know, I took like a 2-week break from fitness because my gym was closed, and I let that be an excuse for me for a little bit. And then I was like, screw it. I have legs. It's nice outside. Go run 2 miles. So I'm doing 2 miles, 22 push-ups, 22 squats, 22 sit-ups. I like the number 22. It makes me feel good. So that's part of my values, is showing up with discipline and doing things in a simple way. Why did I do it that way? Because Cami has a history and tendency to try to make it too hard, where I'm like, run 5 miles, do 3 sets of blah, blah, blah. And then I make it too complex, too hard, and it's done, and I can't do it. I almost made it so simple that I'm like, oh, I'm done with that already? Okay. But it's gaining momentum, right? I'm gaining momentum each time I do it. So make it simple, show up for it. The other question for you guys, this is like a daily question you can wake up with. What brings me joy now? In this moment, not 10 years from now when I have the nice house, when I'm debt-free, when my marriage is perfect. What brings me joy now? It's those little things like lighting a candle, essential oils, snuggling with my dog, creating something. Like, this is a time to create artistically, in your business, in your home. And I actually want to put a challenge up, and I'll have you guys post this in the Facebook group of what are you creating today? What are you creating tomorrow? Like by end of day tomorrow, have something created and post it up in the group. It can be simple. Like I've been on this curly hair journey and I'm like all like into this curly hair thing. For me, that's like my creative process right now, right? I've found something that is creative for me. I also build things for my cat because I'm a crazy cat lady. I saw that Melissa likes to DIY and like repurpose stuff. So that it helps us with calm energy, right? Because when we're focused on a craft or being creative, we are also, it's almost like a meditation in itself. Like you're just doing it. You're not really thinking and letting anxiety come over you. So I'm going to end the call here for the recording for the podcast, but I'm going to open it up for you guys to ask questions and we'll kind of vibe after that. Okay.